What is good, everybody? Welcome to another Niners Nation Instant Reaction podcast. I am Rob Stats Guerrera, joined by the one, the only, you know him on Twitter, Splash Cousin. What's up, Jordan?
What a game. That was definitely not what I had mapping this out pregame, but I think the outcome was one all 49ers fans ultimately enjoyed, even with the obvious loss of the starting quarterback early on.
We are going to get to that. Jordan Elliott, for those of you who don't know. Sorry, I should have said that early. Niners get the win. I'm out of my mind right now. This is unbelievable. We're going to get to Jimmy and all that stuff. I get it. This defense is freaking amazing. And Jordan, going into the game, I said, if the Niners were going to win this game, Nick Bosa had to be the defensive player of the year. Well, guess what? He absolutely was. He answers the bell for this team every single time they need a big play. Big third down, Bosa gets a sack. Big drive, Dolphins are going to have a chance to try and come back. Bosa gets the strip at the end of the game, and Dre Greenlaw picks it up, runs it back into the end zone, and the defense is like, you know what? Screw it. We'll just do it ourselves. And I think that if Bosa's going to win the defensive player of the year, this game against that team and that offense could be the reason why.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think so often we've seen games like this where a team comes in banged up and their offensive line is a little depleted, and they've been able to scheme around with some chip blocking and quick passing game and a lot of things where like Bosa doesn't get to have the impact that he's capable of. And I thought today that even in spite of that, like there was a sack he had earlier in the game where they tried to chip him with a tight end and with a running back, and he still got home and got a hit on Tua. So this was just one of those games that really separates the elite of the elite from the very good. And I think 49ers fans have always been privy to how good Nick Bosa is. But I agree with you completely, Rob. This is the kind of game where you get that like national media really buying in on the Nick Bosa hype, and he starts getting maybe some of that attention that like the Micah Parsons and the Matt Judons and some of those other guys have gotten so far this season.
It could be short-lived because, I mean, Parsons is going to play on Sunday Night Football against the Colts, and they stink. So he may do some crazy stuff, and then people will be like, no, it's still Micah Parsons. But he is right there. As of right now, he's the league leader in sacks. He also just, selfishly did hit his over on sacks for the season in this game, which someone on this show may have bet on before the year started. I just maybe, speaking purely hypothetically. I mean, look, there were plays. First play of the game, obviously Trent Sherfield gets a 75-yard touchdown, and you're like, oh boy. But in typical DeMeco Ryans fashion, he locked it down after the first drive. The Dolphins had 75 yards on that play and only 82 yards the entire rest of the first half.
Yeah, it feels like DeMeco is kind of like one of those boxers where they might take a couple hits in the early rounds, and it's just sort of a way to kind of, feel out the opponent and really feel what they're working with. Because that's, to me, it seems like it's a pattern where week after week, there's, the sky is falling, and I'm on Twitter scrolling, and everybody's panicking on a drive in the first quarter. And then you look up at the end of the game, and the other team has managed to, for the last month before today, not score in the second half. They're going 3 and out. They had the Dolphins offense, which is one of the best in football, in an absolute vice grip for 95% of this game, barring a couple of explosive plays. And I know everybody's getting on Tua right now, but I think that there's a level of uncomfortability that's a direct result of what the 49ers defense and what DeMeco Ryans was doing that led to a lot of the self-inflicted things that Tua is doing. I don't think Tua just woke up on the wrong side of the bed today and just played terribly and, the Niners defense got lucky. Like, this is a direct result of what they were doing and the just the absolute domination they had in this chess match between these two elite units.
Hassan watching on YouTube, thanks for the super chat. Talanoa Hufanga is the Trayvon Diggs of safeties. He did have a dicey play on the Dolphins' final touchdown where he kind of bit down and Charvarius Ward was playing outside, and that essentially left the middle of the field wide open for Tyreek Hill. I was worried about Hufanga in this game. I thought he was going to get picked on a little bit, but again, they only allowed 17 points, so let's calm down there. Also, Flint 7785, thank you on the YouTube page. Brock Purdy is the greatest Mr. Irrelevant of all time. Also, Nick Bosa is a demigod. I'm not 100% sure Nick Bosa is totally human, but we can get to it a little bit now, Jordan. Brock Purdy, pretty good. 25 of 37, 210 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception in the game. The interception was basically meaningless because it came on 4th down and it actually improved the field position in terms of the 49ers defense. Brock Purdy, exactly what you want a backup quarterback to do.
You know what really stood out to me the most, Rob, was that he did not seem like it didn't seem like the moment was too big for him. And you got to think, you're a 7th-round pick. You were on the practice squad to start the season. You've been a backup. This is your first real action in an NFL game, in a regular season game, and we all know the storylines going into this game and the atmosphere and everything that goes into that. And he just stepped in, and the confidence that he was throwing the football with on a couple of those 3rd down conversions they had, to me, is something that, I'm not expecting him to look this good every single week, given the fact he is a rookie and he is a 7th-round pick. But I think that's one of those things, you either have it or you don't. And he has that innate charisma and kind of swagger to him where, with the defense playing this way and the weapons they have, I'm not expecting them to score 30 points every week, but what's to say, who's to say they can't be competitive against any team when you have a guy like Purdy who's willing to take those chances, and you have Shanahan and those skill position guys and the willingness to take chances to get them the ball in space. So my outlook on the season is much more optimistic 2.5 hours later now than it was when Jimmy was first getting carted into that locker room.
I mean, I don't know what the heck Brock Purdy's going to be, but I will say this. The dude is not afraid. I agree with you. He's got some swag. When he throws that first touchdown pass to Christian McCaffrey, he's doing finger guns on the sidelines. He was into it, man. And you know what? If that's the kind of attitude he's going to have, I love it. I absolutely love it. Nathan, watching on the YouTube page, if Purdy can do what he just did, imagine what Trey Lance will be able to do with these offensive weapons and dominating D. Future is bright. Maybe, we can get to that. And thank you, Nathan. I'll just say this, man. We just kicked the tar out of a playoff team with our 3rd-string quarterback. That's what just happened. That's what we saw. A team vying for the number 1 seed in the AFC came into our house and got their doors blown off thanks to this defense and Brock Purdy.
Yeah, and I think the thing that gets lost too with it, right, is that with Trey Lance, I think there's always going to need to be a period of growth because of the limited sample size he had. While Purdy wasn't the touted, top 5 pick, and he went in the 7th round, he's Mr. Irrelevant, all those things. He had years and years worth of starts in a Power 5 conference. And you can say what you want about Iowa State. You can say what you want about the Big 12. But the guy started bowl games. He played in big atmospheres. He had to go on the road to Oklahoma. He had to go on the road into Austin and play in Texas. I do think that experience is kind of overlooked a little bit. And maybe that is why he is a little bit more comfortable to just step in one of those situations than your typical 7th-round guy who maybe started on the practice squad. I do think he has a lot of experience in those bigger spots just due to the body of work he put together in college.
It certainly looked like it today, man. And Bay Marin watching on YouTube, 13. Everybody now knows Brock Purdy's number because of this game. I mean, what an incredible day for the Niners. Trigger watching on the YouTube page. People argued with me that Max Crosby is better than Bosa yesterday. Not even close. Look, you just tell me who I'd rather have. I'm taking Nick Bosa every day of the week. The dude just continues to show up. People just brush aside the fact that he was a monster last year coming off a devastating knee injury. He's better. He's better this year. This is the best Nick Bosa we've ever seen.
Yeah, you know what the problem I think too is, Rob, is that year 1 he came in and he was so good that it reset the expectations of what the typical development is for a even a high-end 1st-round pick. It's going to take some time to adjust. You're obviously going to get better the more reps you get against NFL offensive linemen. But he came in and was so dominant from year 1 that I feel like it's almost like people overlook the fact that he set the floor very high, but the ceiling was still very much we hadn't reached that ceiling yet. And then he gets hurt year 2, year 3, as you just mentioned, he's coming back from that serious injury. So we could just be scratching the surface on how good Nick Bosa is. That's the incredible thing. Let's say he's at 60% of what he could be, and he's already a defensive player of the year candidate, arguably the front runner. He's had a sack in every single game this season that he started and finished. The only game he hasn't got a sack this year was in Carolina when he left at halftime with that groin injury. So if Nick Bosa starts and he finishes a game, he's going to have a sack. That consistency in itself is mind-boggling considering how much teams prep all week to keep 97 out of the backfield.
Yep, and it's not just a sack on 1st down. It's a sack on 3rd down, a sack that takes a team out of field goal range. It's unreal. KVY Nugs watching on my Twitch page at Stats on Fire. Please feel free to follow me. Will Brock Purdy get Twitter verified just like Nick Mullins after the Raiders game? I think he earned it, right? This game, I think, earns Twitter verification, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And, I know that that's the comparison that's so easy to make, and I've made it myself. But I will say this, if you gave 2018 Nick Mullins this defense that the 49ers have this year and some of the skill position guys, you got to remember, he was throwing touchdown passes, no offense. Pierre Garçon was kind of on his way out of the league at that point. They didn't have Christian McCaffrey. They didn't have Ayuk. They didn't have Debo. If you gave that 2018 version of Nick Mullins the rest of this 49ers team, they could make some noise. And if that's what they're getting out of Brock Purdy this season, again, I'm not saying that they're still Super Bowl contenders or that they're going to go on a deep run, but I think at the very least they'll be competitive. And when you lose your first and second string quarterback, if you can still go in and just like you mentioned, they just beat the brakes off a first place team. If you can do that, to me in itself as a victory is still being competitive in that circumstance.
Flint, thanks again for the super chat. Bosa may end up with an ownership stake in this team if this play continues. Jeremy watching on the Facebook page. Brock Purdy knows how to work and move out of the pocket and can run faster than Jimmy. Save some plays. I do agree. So I'm sitting there with my son watching the game, and he's like, who's Brock Purdy? I don't know. I'm like, the one thing that we know he can do, he can move around a little bit and make some off-schedule plays. Now, sometimes it gets him into trouble, but I do like that little for a backup quarterback. I kind of like that little bit of, uncertainty.
Yeah. And even when he was escaping the pocket, there were a couple plays where even still, he took the check down, he threw it to the flat, he hit Debo, he's letting guys create, he's not trying to do too much, but I do like that he has a what feels like a natural ability to kind of sense pressure in those moments. And he did have the one play where he kind of leaked out and he took the sack that, was more on him, I think, where it's all right, you've been extending some plays, but you're not Russell Wilson or Michael Vick or one of these guys that can duck out and outrun these guys that are running 4-3 off the edge, 4-4 off the edge. So I agree, though. And, we saw in a couple of the plays, too, Shanahan was designing rollouts for him. You could see he wanted to get him moving and get him in space. And he's being decisive with the football when he's doing that. The thing I just keep coming back to, Rob, is for a third-string quarterback making their first ever appearance in a regular season NFL game, it's kind of I've never been that impressed with a guy in that, situation that's coming in like that off the bench. You basically called him cold out of the bullpen and he beat a first place team. I'm still having a hard time wrapping my head around it.
Nathan on the YouTube page. Purdy got over that defensive rush really quickly, super composed, hit those slants in front of receivers, no heart attack throws. It was impressive. It was very, very nice to see. And I knew it was only a matter of time before we got to this, Jordan. Daryl watching on Facebook. Hey, Mostert, so much for your quarterback slinging it. You meant to the 49ers defense, shoot your mouth off and motivate again. And we did it with our quarterback not having a full game in the NFL. That's 1,000% true. Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson combined in this game for 8 carries and 33 yards. That's 4.1 yards a carry. Miami ran the ball 5 times in the first half. So that's 3 rushing attempts in the second half for the Dolphins. Bleep around and find out, Raheem Mostert. I thought you were going to go crazy. Where was that? Get the hell out of here.
What was so funny to me, too, was that they were running so much play action. And I'm like, why? Why? Nobody's going to bite. What's the point? You're not running the football. And I don't know if it was a reluctance from a schematic thing or if it was just that, there wasn't the trust in the offensive line with the injuries they had. But it was so funny. They were running play action. It felt like every other play. And just like you mentioned, they ran the ball 7 times in the entire game. So, I don't know what the strategy was coming in, but my whole thing with Mostert's comments was I felt like the timing of it was the most unnecessary thing. If that was something that got said during the offseason, I'm like, all right, whatever. But to me, it gave an added level. Not that the 49ers defense needs any extra motivation. They're a very talented and motivated unit as is. But the last thing you want to do is stoke that fire and make them even more locked in. And if that meant that a couple guys were a little bit more locked in during a film meeting during the week or game planning with their own position groups, it's just never a good idea to give that talented of a group any extra ammunition. And I felt like Mostert with his comments did that.
The last thing you want to do. If there's ever an area of this 49ers team you want to talk trash about, you really want to say, oh, we're going to go crazy on that defense. That's where you're going. Very, very weird. Whatever. This defense is riding high. They said it last week after the Saints game. All we need is a blade of grass. A blade of grass. There was 4 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and the Dolphins had run 4 plays just on the 49ers side of the field. That's how dominant this performance was. I think that we can't overstate it.
Absolutely. And it's one of those ones too, where like, kind of like the Bears game, I know they lost, so it's not exactly the same, but like the Bears couldn't do anything all game. And there were a couple big plays where if you look at the final score, the yardage totals, it doesn't tell the full story. Like this is exactly one of those games where you have to, and I know I'm going to certainly do my part for Niners Nation to do that with the writing I'll be doing, but we have to dive a little deeper between the, touchdown to Sherfield and that deep ball to Tyreek Hill, because obviously they happen and people hate if you take this play away, then this would happen. But to really paint how dominant this unit was for 60 minutes, just like you said, 4 plays on their side of the field against a team that's been lighting all these teams up all season long. And you have Mike McDaniel, who's so highly regarded, not just around the league, but by this 49ers staff. It was an incredible win. And this, I said very early in the season, Rob, that I thought that this defense talent-wise was on par with any of the great defenses of the last 25 years. And I still feel that way 12 weeks, 13 weeks, whatever we are into the season, because they just time and time again rise to the occasion. And I just think that when you have a defense like that and you have a quarterback that's just baseline average, which is what you can expect out of Purdy, it feels like at this point, you have a chance against anybody. And I think that at this point in the season, like that's all you can ask for from the 49ers, is that they have a fighting chance against anybody week in and week out.
Just really quick, because I'm just seeing this on Twitter as I'm trying to keep an eye on things. It looks like Tua hurt his ankle late in the game. What is it with quarterback ankles? Trey Lance's ankle's ruined. Jimmy Garoppolo's ankle is ruined. Now Tua injured, although he's at the podium. So he can't be too hurt, because if you're really hurt, they usually don't let you speak. But yeah, it's just quarterback ankles, man. Who knew? And that, it's interesting. On Friday, Kyle Shanahan was asked again if there was any chance that Trey Lance could come back this season as a backup, and Kyle said no. So now all of a sudden Jimmy Garoppolo is hurt. We don't know the extent of it. It was an ankle injury. He was carted to the locker room. Is it at all possible, Jordan, in any universe, that they play a couple games with Brock and Trey Lance returns this season? Is it totally out of the question? Because I don't think it is.
I think that when Jimmy was healthy, they were comfortable enough doing that. But at this point, like, what is the alternative? Like, I believe it's going to be Purdy, and I'm guessing Jacob Eason at this point. Maybe they bring back Kurt Benkert for the practice squad. And all due respect to those guys, like, this was the year that they were talking about going all in. You traded all those picks for Christian McCaffrey, so you really can't afford to just, we'll see where we go. And if we win 10 games and lose in the first round, it was a good season. You don't pick until day 3 when the draft rolls around next year. So, I still think they're going to be very cautious, and it's going to be a situation where if there's any amount of doubt that he could, not be in a position where that injury is not going to be re-aggravated in a way that it, would normally. Like if there's any risk at all to his prospects of starting week 1 next year, I don't think they'll do it. But modern medicine is incredible. We've seen some absolute miracles in the sport of football with guys coming back much earlier than expected with injury timetables and initial prognoses. So if you start getting to a point where even if it's just to kind of have like a Trey Lance is the emergency backup in a situation where it's like, hey, we're in the playoffs, we're going into Minnesota or somewhere, we're getting by okay with Brock Purdy, but again, this is a season where you're primed to win right now. And if you maybe aren't getting Trey Lance where he's completely mobile and you get the running threat you normally get, but he can comfortably throw from the pocket without further risk to that injury that's been healing, I don't see how you can't do it. Again, no disrespect to Jacob Eason or Kurt Benkert, to those guys, but there's a reason why the depth chart was ordered the way it was coming into the season. And I just think that you can't punt the season because of these quarterback injuries if you can help it.
So I just saw this from Mike Silver on Twitter. Quote, the 49ers are bracing themselves for bad news on Jimmy Garoppolo's left foot injury. Nothing official yet. I thought it was an ankle. Mike Silver said foot. I don't know. We'll see. But, I mean, look, no matter – we all saw the injury. Whether it's a high ankle sprain or a broken ankle, those do not heal quickly. And this was week 13. So, I don't expect to see Jimmy Garoppolo back anytime soon, and he may be done for the year.
Yeah, and like at that point, like you have to really look within, because as great as I thought Brock Purdy was today, I don't think it's fair to expect that they're just going to rattle off a bunch. Like they play Tampa Bay next week. That's going to be a really tough game. They have to go to Seattle on a short week. Like the schedule is going to get tough. So there's a big difference between like, all right, Brock Purdy, take the wheel. You're leading us all the way home versus, if it's a 4 to 6 week thing and it's like, hey, we just need to get to 9 or 10 wins, find a way to win the division, and then the starter comes back. So I'm really, really interested to see where that goes, because again, as long as his defense is intact, they can handle just about anybody. But at a certain point, it's going to come down to Brock Purdy making throws that I don't think it's fair to expect a player in his position to make. And if he makes them, great. We all saw that, we rode the Nick Mullins roller coaster in 2018. That was certainly fun for a while. But I want to temper expectations accordingly and not just think that every week they're going to have this Mr. Irrelevant beating first place teams the way they did this week.
I don't care if I said it earlier. I'm going to say it again. The 49ers just boat raced a playoff team with their third string quarterback. So I don't want to hear anybody say, oh, well, who has this team played? Because people are hitting me up left, right, and center. This defense hasn't played anybody. You only beat up on the NFC West. Well, guess what? The big bad Dolphins came to town, and we chewed them up and spit them out. Great. They scored on the first play of the game. Awesome. They couldn't even get to 20 points today. Okay, so I don't want to hear any more talk, any more doubting this 49ers defense. They are dominant. As you said, as good as any defense that we have seen in a long, long time. So what's the next question going to be? Tom Brady next week? Okay, great. Bring him on. Bring in 45-year-old Tom Brady, and let's see how he does.
Absolutely. And, one of the big tests, too, I thought was, this Dolphins defense is very reliant on man coverage. They have really good corners. They have a good secondary, and they have a lot of confidence in those guys. So they'll send a lot of pressure. They'll leave guys on an island. And I think that's one area where it's tough sometimes for young quarterbacks when you don't have the chemistry with your receivers yet, when you don't have that feel. And there were a couple of plays where Purdy diagnosed a blitz, immediately stood tall and delivered a strike when they needed it. So I'm not saying it's going to be easier going forward because I don't think the Dolphins defense is, this elite unit that's setting the bar the way the Niners are. But it was a very tough test. And I think it was a much tougher test schematically than maybe the numbers would indicate for the Dolphins. And I thought Purdy did admirably given those situations. And if he can sit there and stand tall against a 5-6 man pressure with corners like the Dolphins have and that defensive scheme that they're running, I think he can do it against some of these other units. And, it's going to be really interesting to see what, that game in Seattle a couple weeks out, that to me is going to be the ultimate test because it's a hostile environment. It's on the road. Their defense is playing a little bit better than I think numbers would indicate as well. But he faced a big test today and I thought he passed it. So there's reason for optimism. I understand people not being 100% in yet, but I think there's absolutely reason to be optimistic going forward with him.
Brian watching on the Facebook page. Good point. Hey, Brock Purdy played good, but the defense did not plan for him. Next week we'll show if Purdy starts. Yes, 100%. Absolutely. We have don't just think that, Brock Purdy is just going to start rolling people. No. But it was nice to see today. And it's Sunday, man. Let's just be happy today. I can worry about whether Brock Purdy can beat the Buccaneers next week. This is an incredible win. And we don't know how the season's going to end. We don't know any of that stuff. But today I can sit here and be freaking thrilled. And I want to give a little bit of love to Christian McCaffrey because he was incredible again for the 49ers. 17 carries for 66 yards, 8 catches for 80 yards, tied for the team lead in targets, had a huge touchdown as well, receiving touchdown. I know they gave up a lot of picks, Jordan, but every one of those picks seems worth it. I said in the Rams game, he earned one of those picks right in that game. He may have earned another one of those picks because he was fantastic today.
Absolutely. And I think, I apologize if this is just surface level, but I really feel like that it just comes down to health because I think the talent is indisputable with Christian McCaffrey and all those things you just mentioned. The only thing that would make that trade not worth it is if there was a stretch where they weren't having him on the field at a rate where, you'd want a weapon of that caliber. His ability to create, it wasn't just him today. Deebo Samuel did this as well, but the 49ers skill position ability to create something out of nothing is just remarkable. That play where Deebo had 4 Dolphins defenders 15 yards in the backfield, and he literally ducks underneath them. And it was, I think the broadcast said it was the most impressive 4-yard loss they'd ever seen. And I was right there with him. I'm he was dead to rights in the backfield, nowhere to go. And yet he still turned what could have been a disaster into, it's a 2nd and 14. We could manage this. And I think so often the 49ers this season have had guys like Kittle and Deebo and Ayuk and, McCaffrey who are able to take just that, throw to the flat, that quick slant, that short area passing game and turn it into something. And with Brock Purdy, that again provides optimism going forward where he's shown that he's not only comfortable, but confident enough to throw balls into tight windows. Like that ball he threw to McCaffrey in the end zone, the play before they scored the touchdown right before halftime. That was a beautiful ball threaded between defenders on the back shoulder. Like that's a big time throw, and the confidence to be able to throw that in the red zone. I was extremely impressed by it. So I'm with you. I think as long as those guys stay healthy, why not believe this team can go toe to toe with anybody?
So we got a little bit of breaking news here. Kyle Shanahan just came to the podium. He said that Jimmy Garoppolo will undergo season-ending foot surgery. Jimmy has a broken foot. There's a fracture. Kyle's exact quote was, he'll be out. He'll need surgery. Broke a few things in there. So that is the official news from Kyle Shanahan. It is the Brock Purdy show going forward, unless something crazy happens with Trey Lance. A question here from someone watching on YouTube. I apologize. I don't know how to say your name. I don't want to butcher it, so I won't. Torres, I'll say. Sorry. Stats, is Trey coming back? Heard you talking about this scenario. Look, I know it's doubtful, but I don't think it's out of the question now. That's all I'm going to say. Let's see. Glass City. What about Jordan Mason, baby? Good vision and a strong runner. He's a tank. Well, that's what I was thinking during this game when Jimmy went down. The 49ers are constructed to hopefully withstand this scenario, right? Your quarterback goes down. They still have all those weapons like you talked about, Debo and McCaffrey, guys that can literally make something out of nothing, that can take a short pass and take it a long way. They have the defense there. The special teams have been playing better. Robbie Gould hit a huge field goal in this one to put them up 9 before the Bosa strip sack. They're supposed to be insulated against this kind of thing. Now, I know it's the quarterback and that's dicey, but hopefully they can lean on these other pieces.
Absolutely. And, Vish said something fantastic, I thought, earlier, and he put it perfectly, as he usually does, that the 49ers are the least quarterback-dependent team, arguably, in the NFL. Like, they're the team that has proven time and time again they have the defense, they have the skill position, they have the scheme, where obviously it still hurts. You can't downplay the loss of Jimmy, just like you couldn't downplay the loss of Trey Lance. But with the total package that they have as a team, I think that loss hurts them far. Like most teams, you're on your third string quarterback, season's over. We can still talk about the 49ers being a playoff team. That's absolutely incredible in my eyes.
It's absurd, but I don't think it's totally out of the question. I really don't. It's wild to say. Like, I really would like to get a season where we don't have to talk about the second and third string quarterbacks. Like it's unbelievable how much we have to do it in 49ers land, but it's funny. And, this is so ironic that literally on the day that this bogus report comes out about, well, under the right circumstances, Jimmy Garoppolo might be back next year. The same day that happens, he breaks his foot and he's out for the year. It's wild how this is going down. By the way, can I just say that report was such crap. It was such a nothing burger report. Under the right circumstances, Jimmy G could come back next year. Yeah, well, maybe the right circumstances are the 49ers pay him $40 million a year, or the right circumstances are they have to get rid of Trey Lance. Like that report was so vague and ridiculous that I hated that it was out there. It was just like clearly like this insider needs to fill time on the pregame show on Sunday, so let's throw something out there. Do you think that this does? What do you think this means for Jimmy Garoppolo's future? Do you think that it makes him more likely to return to the Niners next year?
I think it's tough because, again, it obviously depends on the recovery and what it looks like. But, I'm no doctor, but I doubt it would be something where he'd be out until mini camp next year. Like, I imagine this is something that gets sorted out by then. And in years past, I might be more inclined to say, hey, he's comfortable here. The guys like him. Maybe there's a path for him to be in a competition with Trey or something going forward. But I'll be honest, Rob, like the quarterback play around the league this year has been god awful. Like it's just been terrible league wide, given the exception of a few really elite guys. So I still think there's a market for Jimmy that wasn't there last year, just based on how poorly a lot of quarterbacks league wide have played. And, obviously getting hurt is never a positive, but if there's any silver lining to it from, a market standpoint, it's that the majority of the film on him this year is really good. Like there wasn't that like disaster coming back down to earth game. So if I'm his agent or I'm somebody pitching teams next season, like you can point back to 10 weeks of really solid football from him. So because of that, I think that there will be a market for him. And I think the 49ers are committed to the optics that they are still all in on Trey Lance. We'll see if that changes going forward. It's a week-to-week league, and I've seen crazier things happen. But I just think the combination of how everything's gone down with him And the fact that I think there will be other suitors, I'd be pretty surprised if he's back with the 49ers next season.
What do you think of this? This is a quote from Kyle after the game. It was crushing. I got the news in the second quarter, Shanahan said. It was a hell of a job by Brock coming in and stepping up. We'll be ready to do our best, blah, blah, blah. Garoppolo left the stadium in the third quarter. I don't know. Is that normal? I have no idea. Did Trey Lance leave the stadium after his injury? Maybe he had to go right to the hospital. I have no idea. Maybe Jimmy did too. I have no clue. When I saw that, though, I was just like, that's interesting.
I definitely, during the game, before any news came out, was keeping an eye on. I'm like, man, like usually at this point you see that he's, back out in like a hoodie. He's in street clothes with the hat on or something. And, they'll rule him out, but he's back on the sideline. And I did make note of that during the game. I'm like, man, they haven't showed a sideline shot of him. He hasn't come back out. We're not getting any updates. So I'd imagine it was something to do like with that, Robbie, probably back at the hospital or something like that. But it definitely was something during the game where I'm like, oh man, this can't be good news, because at a certain point, even if it was, a high ankle sprain or something like that, you'd see him back on the sideline with his teammates, and they'd show Fox does it every time there's an injury like that. They show this guy on the sideline talking to his teammates in the street clothes and stuff. But I would imagine it's something like that. I don't think he just, took off and was like, I'm out of here. I'm not staying for the rest of this.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that. I'm just, they probably don't want him on the sideline anyway. Trigger watching on YouTube says the fact that this defense is missing key starters to injury and is still good is insane. I totally agree. I'm trying to see, because I'm trying to keep an eye on Twitter here to see what else Kyle Shanahan is saying after the game. Kyle Shanahan confirmed again that Lance is out for the season. Damn.
Hey, Cam Newton's out there. I'm just saying, Cam Newton, Kyle's offense.
It is wild. I appreciate Mr. Abdi on YouTube watching and helping us with the headlines. Kyle Shanahan says Jimmy G has a foot fracture. Yes, we did know that. We did see that. Thank you very much. I don't want to take the focus off the defense because they were so good. If I said that, what's a number for you that the Niners had to score offensively the rest of the year to win most games? Is it 20?
I think 20 keeps them competitive, and if they get like 23 to 24, they have a good chance. The problem is that eventually you're going to need more than that, and are you going to be able to scheme around the limitations of breaking in a new quarterback that doesn't have the experience that the previous two had with the first team and with the amount of reps? Trey Lance had the off season to work, and Jimmy's obviously been there for a few years, but I mean, like looking at the schedule, like there's not a team I'm looking at where I'm like, oh no, like this 49ers defense is going to have a hard time slowing teams down. And everybody points to the Chiefs game. That Chiefs game, they brought back a ton of guys before they were ready. I think that was Jimmy Ward's first game of the season. Bosa, Mooney Ward both didn't look right. They didn't have Eric Armstead. We saw it today, even in limited action. That interception that Jimmy Ward had was a direct result of the pressure Eric Armstead got. He actually got his hand onto his non-throwing shoulder as he let go of that ball. So it's incredible to say, but I still don't think we've seen the best of this 49ers defense yet. I think they'll only continue to get better the later we get into the season. So I would say probably, let's say 21 is a safe number. If they can score 21, I think they'll be able to pull out victories in most of these games.
Okay, so now what we're getting the crazy quarterback suggestions. JJ00 on Twitch, @StatsOnFire on Twitch if you want to sign up, by the way. Thank you very much. RG3, Phillip Rivers, not Cam Newton. We got another suggestion here. Colin Kaepernick is out there. People are saying, go get Nick Foles. You can't go get Nick Foles. He's on somebody else's team. We're just throwing anybody that you've ever heard play quarterback is now eligible for the 49ers. Boomer Esiason's out there too. Should we get Steve Young was probably at the stadium. Maybe we should hit him up.
I mean, I don't know if he's recovered yet. I saw Drew Brees, got hit by lightning a couple days ago or something, but maybe he's available too.
Oh,
they can get him to come back.
People are look, Kenny G just threw out Drew Brees. That would be why. I mean, like with this team, let me just say for the record, I don't put anything past this team. Who knows the kind of crazy stuff that they're going to come up with? Mildly Cyrus on Twitch. Dan Marino was in the stands. That's right. Call up Danny. Like, who knows what's going to happen? And maybe they just say it's Brock from here on out. I don't know, but it is wild, man. Who knows what the hell is going to happen? This season is this is insane.
Honestly, Rob, the Phillip Rivers one is really intriguing. I don't know where Phillip Rivers stands or if he's completely done with football, but like that one to me is interesting. If that was ever a remote possibility, I'd be absolutely here for it. And I think the energy and the fire he plays with would fit in great with this team. And he's somebody where, again, like he's proven that he can get the ball to skill position guys in the right spots. Fitzpatrick, I see, that's another one I talked with somebody about earlier today that, would be pretty interesting. But I think they are going to do Brock's our guy. We're sticking with him. But if I'm them, I'd start looking at one of those guys to sign and bring in. And maybe you start seeing during practice that maybe one of those guys still has it, because you don't need them to come in and carry an offense. You don't need them to come in and be a superstar. You just you're going to get to a point where Brock Purdy is going to face a lot of adversity, and maybe he overcomes it. He has charisma, he has the swagger. But if you have a guy who is a, long-term NFL veteran who just needs to come in and execute, and just needs to come in and know where to go with the ball and understand the coverages he's seeing and do a lot of the things that it's unfair to expect a 7th-round rookie to do, maybe you have to go down that avenue, because this isn't 2018, right? This isn't 2020 even.
Yep.
You're starting to get to the end of this window. And what it really feels like, Rob, is it feels like we're going to look back on this 10 years from now, 15 years from now. Look at how loaded this 49ers roster is with all these all-pros on both sides of the ball. And it's going to really just come down to the fact they couldn't have a quarterback that could stay healthy. And this is now 3 times in 6 years that Shanahan's lost a starting quarterback for the year. And he's lost 2 starting quarterbacks for the year in the season. So it's just,
Kyle Shanahan is the only quarterback in the league that can say the last time I had my starter for 16 games, the last 2 times, I went to the Super Bowl. Matt Ryan and Jimmy Garoppolo in 2019. He's the only guy that can say that. It's crazy. The names people are throwing out, Mike on the Facebook page, Ryan Fitzpatrick. That's actually, you know what? I honestly would consider it, to be honest with you. And Bill and others, Andrew Luck's names, but Andrew Luck is not even thinking about football. That said, I would still give him a call. But no, it's wild, the name. Look, people suggesting Ben Roethlisberger. No way. It is just crazy that this is where we are. It's unbelievable that this is where we are, but we're really going to go the rest of the way with a 3rd-string quarterback. And then let me just say, if somehow the 49ers can pull this off, this is bigger than Nick Foles going to the Super Bowl and winning the Super Bowl. If somehow the Niners, if you get to the playoffs even, Brock Purdy was the last pick of the entire draft. Literally Mr. Irrelevant. That's what they call this dude. And now he gets to pilot the ship. This is somehow you are carpooling with somebody and they have a Lamborghini and they're like, oh, you know what? I don't feel good. I can't drive. Can you drive? And you're like, oh my God, I got to steer this thing. I'm just trying not to crash into a telephone pole on the side of the road.
And that's the great thing, is that this isn't a race where you need Brock Purdy to be, an F1 driver or something, right? He just needs to not crash the car. He needs to keep the car on the road and prevent it from veering off and going into a ditch. And, when the playoffs come, I could see a scenario where it's going to be really hard, where you're going to need to make plays. You're going to need to do things that are very difficult to do as somebody who doesn't have the experience at the NFL level that he's obviously lacking. But I just keep coming back to the fact that if we go back and we look at the playoffs last season, I don't want to take away from what Jimmy and that offense did accomplish. But if I'm looking at that, is it out of the realm of possibility that Purdy couldn't do those same things? And I think it's absolutely within the realm of possibility, right? There is a reality that exists where Brock Purdy can be efficient enough to scrape out wins. And hey, if you win by 1 or you win by 15, they all count the same, especially come playoff time. And I think just the way that this defense plays, if they're able to continue to control the ball they did today and continue to really eat up clock and keep that defense fresh, there's a great chance. The thing that's going to be their undoing is if they get into a spot where they're just really inconsistent, they're not able to string together drives, and the defense may hold in the middle part of games. But what I think we saw today was, I think at some point in the 4th quarter, the 49ers had run twice as many plays on offense than the Dolphins had, and that kept the defense fresh to really, lock in and get after Tua when they had to throw.
Yep. The 49ers ran 79 plays in this game. The Dolphins ran 45. So that's exactly what you're talking about. It's a huge advantage. D. Melanie watching on YouTube. If the Niners avoid a collapse and still win the division, Shanahan should get strong consideration for Coach of the Year. Abso-freaking-lutely, he should get strong consideration for Coach of the Year. A lot of people are still asking about Trey Lance. If you're just joining us, Kyle Shanahan reiterated again in the press conference that Trey Lance is not coming back this year. So no. Hassan, thanks for the super chat. Andrew Luck, another Andrew Luck suggested. Guys, Andrew Luck hasn't played in a football game in a billion years. He's doing his book club. He's not about that life anymore. It would be amazing, but no. He's not about that life anymore. It's just going to be Brock. And you know what? The rest of this season is house money. Like, it was bad enough when Trey got hurt, but it was like, all right, we still have Jimmy. Now you got Brock Purdy. Just sit back and enjoy it. And whatever happens, if they can win some games, good. I mean, I really think that's the way you have to look at it. Again, we're talking about a third string quarterback here. So just adjust yourselves a little bit and just enjoy the ride.
Absolutely. And like, you got to think about the alternatives, right? Like, we could be sitting here in a very sullen mood thinking about or talking about how the 49ers just lost 45-6 to the Miami Dolphins.
Right. And we've been there before after a Dolphin game.
Yeah, when the quarterback had to leave, right? They got absolutely steamrolled the last time. So I think even just today, like, I really appreciate what you're saying about like enjoying the moment, right? Because it could have been so much worse today. And the fact that we do have this optimism where we're like, hey, you know what? Like, Brock Purdy looks like a guy that might be able to, keep the car on, cruise control and keep it staying within the lanes and not veering off to the side. Like, that might be enough. And hey, if they win a game in the playoffs, 2 games in the playoffs, great. But I'm with you. If they somehow find a way to win 10 games, win the NFC West, which if they win that game in Seattle, that'll be monumental. That all but locks up the division for them, in my opinion. This is one of the finer head coaching jobs we've seen from Kyle, and he went to a Super Bowl. He went to an NFC Championship game. But I just think that the way they've been able to adapt to the loss of the quarterback position year after year, like, nobody's better suited for this than Kyle Shanahan is. So at the same time, like, I feel like a lot of people are stuck, feeling kind of like a fish out of water. They lose a starting quarterback. Oh no, what do I do now? Like, this is the third time in 6 years Kyle's had to do it. So at a certain point, like, I think we also have to discuss that there's not really anybody else that's better equipped for this chaos than Kyle has been. And we kind of saw it. I mean, I know, like, Jimmy was the starter and he's been there for years, but I think people tend to lose sight of, like, they've been winning all these games with who was their backup quarterback, the guy they were ready to part ways with, the guy they were looking to trade during the offseason, and who was the number 2 quarterback coming into week 1. And they've won a ton of games with him. But everybody's like, oh, just because it's Jimmy, it's different. Like, he's still the backup quarterback. Like, they've been winning games all year with a backup quarterback, and they just won a game against a very, very good team with the last pick in the draft as a rookie. Like, at a certain point, we do need to appreciate that maybe Kyle is up to the challenge to do this,
Kyle Shanahan said John Lynch and the personnel department have already started the process of figuring out what they want to do at the backup quarterback position. He did say backup quarterback position. Kent's watching on the Facebook page. Can we win the West with Purdy? Hell yeah, you can win the West. Maybe not. If this was week 1, I would say no, but San Francisco's 8-4. The Seahawks are closest at 7-5, but the Niners have a win over them already. Now they will play them on a Thursday, and that's in Seattle. That's going to be a dicey game. But I can absolutely see the 49ers hanging on to win the West. It might not be pretty, but, I mean, the rest of their schedule, Buccaneers, Seahawks, Commanders, Raiders, Cardinals. It's doable. You need to have a defense playing at an elite level. But guess what? We do.
Yeah, and like, the 49ers to get to 10 wins need to go 2-3 over the last 5 games, right? And if you look at, like, I don't like looking at the schedule and be like, oh, this is a win, this is a loss. But if you look at the 5 games in front, I think there's absolutely a path to winning at least 2 of those 3 games. And again, like with Seattle, not only do they have the head-to-head, they have the 4 wins in the division already. So they already have a winning record in the division. If they were to beat them another time, that all but locks it up. And I just keep coming back to, there really is not a ton that is going to be put on the plate of the quarterback in this offense, right? Like, it's not like they just lost Josh Allen and they have to find a way to replicate the guy that's accounting for 80% of their offense. I think Jimmy's been playing the best football of his career this year. I think that he's played very admirably, but I also think that this, again, is an offense and a scheme that is better equipped to deal with a loss like this than arguably any other in the NFL. And we just saw today that the guy they have who's going to be in there for now, he might just have the charisma and the swagger and just the natural ability to be just good enough to get by. And if we're still talking about the 49ers playing in the wild card round, massive success this season, given all the adversity they faced.
Brock Purdy at the podium after the game, talking about how his first start's going to be against Brady. Quote, he's been playing football longer than I've been alive. Having the first start against the GOAT is pretty cool. I've just got to do my thing, be efficient, and play football. Yep. That is the mindset. Get ready for a lot of screens, a lot of dump offs to Debo and Christian McCaffrey. a lot of short passes to Kittle and hope that they have to break a bunch of tackles. But that's what you got to do sometimes. And, like I said, adjust the expectation. It can't get any worse for the 49ers this year, pretty much. Let's just see it. Let's just see what happens.
You know what was one thing that really stood out too, and I'll get a better sense for it when I get the chance to go back and watch coach's film and really dive into it. But just from the first watch, there were a lot of plays, especially on those 3rd and longs when the Dolphins knew they were going to throw, where he just looked so comfortable in the pocket. He stood tall, he didn't panic, he didn't look to run. A lot of times when you get a guy out there in their first action, their first read isn't there. That first, progression when they get to the top of their drops in there, they're immediately looking to run and scramble. And he looked just so comfortable standing tall. And while he doesn't have the strongest arm or the greatest physical gifts, I do think he's a guy that is capable of knowing where to go with the football. That was the thing to me with Nick Mullins, right? Nick Mullins more often than not knew where to go with the football. He knew where to go within the structure of the play that was being called. A lot of times just the physical ability was what prevented the play from being, a success. And I do think Purdy is a more athletic version of that, where you do get a little bit more of the scrambling ability. You do get a little bit better ball downfield. But he showed to me, there were a couple plays where maybe he didn't go to where exactly he needed to. I know everybody was pointing out the interception he threw on 4th and 1 when McCaffrey was open in the flat. That stuff will get sorted out. But on a couple of those shots to the intermediate level, he stood tall, he was patient, he didn't panic, and he was able to find a receiver that was wide open to the boundary a couple times. And I think that in itself can create enough offense week to week where they can scrape out these wins against quality opponents.
Oh, man. It's possible the 49ers Super Bowl hopes died today. I do want to say that. But with this defense playing as good as they are, it's possible they haven't. That's literally how good they have been. Just to get into some of the big plays in this game, since this is the Instant Reaction podcast, the 4th down play, Kyle Shanahan is really freaking good at these replay challenges. He was right on Olave with the Saints last week. I didn't think that had any chance of being overturned. And that 4th and 2 play with Mike Gesicki, where it looked like the Dolphins sort of stole one right by the sideline. Kyle challenged it, and sure enough, bam, reversed it again. Niners get the ball back with 6 minutes left to go in the 4th. They go 10 plays down the field. They take 4 minutes off the clock. They get the field goal that put them up 9, and it was basically over from there on out because Nick Bosa is a monster.
Absolutely. And, I think that's an area where I don't have the exact numbers, so I could be off, but just basing off, top of my head, it felt like for a while, Kyle kind of struggled with challenges. He would challenge stuff where I'd be sitting there and I'm like, dude, what do you say? You just burned a timeout. What was that? And he's been on, I don't want to jinx it. I'll knock on wood as I say this, but he's been on a little bit of a heater lately. It feels like when he's throwing that flag now, you feel pretty confident that whatever is being looked at is going to get overturned. And I thought that one to Gesicki was big because I feel like a lot of times that's one where it's having to be made in such a split, second decision. I'm sure there's somebody in the booth up top that's radioing down and saying, hey, the ball's out. You need to challenge this. You need to go. And I think that shows there's a lot of trust within the staff as well, because I doubt that Shanahan was, able to see that ball. When I first looked at it, I thought Gesicki caught it cleanly, and I didn't realize he never had possession when they started showing the slow-mo replays and stuff like that. But we have 5 minutes to look at that after the play's over. Those decisions have to be made in 10, 15 seconds as the other team's trying to get up to the line to snap the ball. So I do think that is commendable in the sense that he's being more willing, it feels like, to trust his staff to throw flags in those, instances.
Brian Elliott on Facebook. Kyle was great coaching today. Challenges and 4th downs going for it. I keep saying, I think maybe he's turned a corner a little bit. He's a little more willing to go for it on 4th down. I love it. Kevin Dennis watching on YouTube. Someone seriously needs to explain why Kyle only goes for it on 4th downs with quarterbacks not named Jimmy Garoppolo. That's true, Jordan. With Trey Lance, he went for it on 4th down a lot. And now with Brock Purdy, I think that all points to a level of trust, especially with Brock. Brock Purdy, but yeah, man, whatever, Kyle sees in him, he must like it. And it's funny because I was talking with Mike Silver a few weeks ago just about Jimmy Garoppolo and everything. And he kind of threw out there hey, they really like Brock Purdy. And I got on him about, he's the last pick in the draft, blah, blah, blah. And he said, you got to get over thinking that way. Yes, he was the last pick in the draft, but the draft is over now. Now he's just a guy on your team. And for whatever reason, Kyle loves him. I mean, clearly they picked him. And so maybe there is a level of trust there with Brock Purdy and Kyle Shanahan that we don't know about.
You know what I think the common denominator is too is like with Trey Lance last year, like that Arizona game, they went for it. It felt like 5 or 6 times on 4th down. Like every time there was a decision, 5 times. I think a lot of that has to do with there's such a big sample size with Jimmy where if they punt and rely on the defense, they've eked out a lot of close wins and they're able to somehow find a way to win a lot of these games. Not saying it's because of Jimmy, but just with him there, they found a way to do it. Versus like with the rookie, I don't fault him for not wanting to put it completely on the defense. And I think just the area of the field, like once you start getting into that range where like Robbie Gould's automatic from 50 yards in, it feels like. And once you start kind of pushing that 55, 54-yard field goal, it seems like Kyle's a little bit more willing to push the envelope a bit. Because I think it was like 4th and 4 that he went for it on that interception that Purdy threw? It wasn't a gimme by any means. It was a decent chunk of yardage. And I think just like the combination of that area of the field and the combination of – I think trust, you absolutely nailed it. Like there absolutely has to be trust to be willing to call that. But I also think it's not wanting to put everything on the defense and knowing that, we may only have X amount of opportunities to be on our opponent's side of the field with our 7th round, 3rd string quarterback in his first action. We haven't had time to game plan or anything. So I think it's his personnel, like his feel for personnel is evolving, it feels like, where he is more cognizant of that stuff. And he's not just looking at it through the lens of, all right, we'll punt. We have the best defense in the NFL. Like having a better feel for understanding that as great as I might be designing plays and all these skill position guys, we might not get this opportunity again. Let's maximize it while we still can.
And I think that's exactly how he has to look at it. And don't turtle up now because Brock Purdy's in there. Do the opposite. Like you said, you can't take those for granted. 49ers offense in the second half goes punt, field goal, punt, field goal. When you got Brock Purdy in there and he's taken over without any practice reps, that's pretty damn good. Meanwhile, the Dolphins go interception, touchdown, turnover on downs, fumble recovered for a touchdown, interception. The whole the 49ers second half scoring streak came to an end. Yes, it did. But you know what? That is as dominating a second half as you could possibly have if you're the 49ers.
Absolutely. And it's something you take every single time, given the context of the opponent and what's going on. And what's going to happen, Rob, is everybody's going to talk about Tua and how Tua looked terrible and it was just an off week for him and he wasn't good. There'll be all these excuses thrown around. And at a certain point, I love the whole respect is earned, not given thing. But if you're not willing to concede that the 49ers defense has earned their respect, to me, you're just not worthy of having a conversation with it. I'm just not going to waste my time arguing with you. They've shown that they can do it at the highest level. And even if you go back to that game against the Chiefs, I don't think that's a fair assessment because of the injuries they had to deal with. But if you go back to it, it wasn't like they didn't have an answer for a lot of the stuff the Chiefs were doing. It just was a slight missed angle here, it felt more like a rust thing. And the fact that a third of their defense was either returning from injury or missing the game rather than, they're just outmatched and can't match up with these guys. Those guys in the locker room are far too humble to come out and say it, but they know they can go toe to toe with anybody. They know the amount of fear that they strike into opposing offenses. And right now, around the league, especially with Vic Fangio in a consulting role or whatever he's doing off to the side this year, who's better than DeMeco Ryans? DeMeco Ryans in his second year as an NFL defensive coordinator is arguably the best of the 32 in the league. That in itself is absolutely incredible and just speaks volumes to how immensely talented he is at calling a defense and, making those adjustments within the game.
Maxime watching on YouTube, you guys mentioned managed to talk about the 4th and 2 without mentioning Greenlaw. Did you forget about Trey? You can't forget about Trey. I think we know that. He was all over the field. He was running crossing routes against Tyreek Hill, and he was step for step with him pretty much, which is insane because we're talking about Tyreek Hill. Greenlaw, I thought, had a good game. There was a play on, maybe it was that crossing pattern play that I'm thinking of where he stops Hill. He runs with Tyreek Hill. Hill catches the short pass. Greenlaw stops, makes the tackle, and he could have slammed him on the ground, and he didn't. He held up. He let up. I was like, because sometimes Drake gets a little nuts out there.
It's so funny that you just used the word nuts because there was a play, I forget who he tackled earlier in the game, but he did that two fists, banged his helmet after the play, and you could tell he was fired up and talking to himself. He had to stop a couple yards within the line of scrimmage. And I'm like, man, he is just that throwback, old school football player, like the guys who played in the 80s and 90s would love talking about guys like this that still exist in the modern NFL. One of those guys that could transcend eras. And I'm like, he's an absolute nut job, but in like the best way possible. Like one that every defensive coordinator would kill to have on their team because of the energy and the intensity he plays with. And he is not somebody that I would want to have to meet in the gap running between the tackles. He's just somebody that he exudes passion on that football field. And I think that the biggest thing today was you got the fire and the energy from him, but it was in a disciplined way. Just like you mentioned, like taking a disciplined angle to Tyreek Hill in the open field. We see all pro defenders get embarrassed week after week by this guy. And the way that to me was more impressive than the 4th and 2, pass breakup or whatever you want to call it. He had on Gesicki, being able to limit Tyreek Hill to basically nothing when it's you and him on an island one-on-one and you're a linebacker, like that to me, like that's some stuff if I'm him, I'm saving that tape. I'm showing my grandkids that one day, like that's a big achievement that, so yeah, he was phenomenal today. Absolutely incredible.
Last thing I want to mention, because you said the 49ers are too humble to say that they're the best defense. Fred Warner ain't too humble. Listen to this. This is a double whammy from Fred. Asking about Brock Purdy. His quote is, Brock has played against the best defense in the league for the past 13 weeks. He ain't wrong. Brock is going to be just fine. He said that Purdy has thrown no-look passes in practice, putting the ball where it's supposed to be. We talked about the swag. There it is, man. You're Brock Purdy. You're the practice squad quarterback. He's like, F it. Let's just do some crazy stuff out there. I like it.
I like that Fred's talking like that too, because I think that those guys need to have that, confidence in themselves, because they've been a special group. This will be the 4th straight season that they'd be a top 5 defense if the results hold. But this one is like head and shoulders above the previous 3. And that's no disrespect to those ones. They obviously went to a Super Bowl one year. They went to the NFC Championship game last year. But just top to bottom, there's no weakness on this defense. Even, they're down a starting corner. Diamador Lenore had a pick today. He looked great. He didn't get burned. He didn't get exposed. That was the thing. It was like, oh, they're going to pick on Diamador Lenore all day. He looked great out there today. Hufanga may have had, a blown coverage or something here or there. It looked like it was cover 3 on that, where he jumped the crosser a little bit.
Yeah, he jumped down.
He's been phenomenal all season. I think that you'd be hard-pressed to find an offensive coordinator who's going into the meeting room and circling Talanoa Hufanga like, oh, this guy's the weak link on this defense. Like, there isn't anybody that I'm looking at in the starting 11 where you're like, man, this is really what's going to hold them back from being great. And I think that I'm struggling to think of another defense in the NFL where you can look at all 11 guys and feel like they are just locked in at the level they've been week after week.
And they still don't have Javon Kinlaw, and they're missing Emmanuel Mosley, obviously. This is hilarious. This is just an example of the comments I'm looking at. We've got this comment from Akshay on YouTube. Losing Jimmy is tough. The very next comment in the chat is this from James Wilson. Losing Jimmy Garoppolo ain't nothing. That's where we are. But look, we've had a lot of wins this year with the Niners winning the game and key players getting injured. Today is another example of it. Like I said, we don't know what's going to happen with Brock going forward. We don't know any of that stuff. Today, be as happy as you can knowing that Jimmy Garoppolo is gone, because you whooped up on the Dolphins 33-17. There were a lot of games this year where you didn't score 30 points with Jimmy Garoppolo. You didn't score 30 points with Trey Lance. Today was, for the most part, a good day, and there's nothing wrong with being happy today.
Absolutely. And it's a struggle I have week after week on Twitter, Rob, right? Like every time I get into these arguments, we're like, oh, they didn't score enough. They didn't do this. I'm like, winning in the NFL is hard. I'm 27. The majority of my 27 years on this earth, the 49ers have been a terrible football team. So weeks like this, I try not to let go. Seasons where they make a playoff run or they win 10 games or win the division, I try to hold dear, because it's very hard to do that in the NFL. And I just think that there's this very unrealistic expectation where, it's just like expected that this team's going to win 12 games every season. And it's very hard to do. If it was that easy, they wouldn't play the games and the NFL wouldn't have the parity that it has week after week. So yeah, I'm right there with you. This is the kind of thing that should be enjoyed, because honestly, they could play next week against the Bucs and they could get blown out by 40. And I'd rather sit here and enjoy the next 5 or 6 days than sit here and be doom and gloom about what could potentially happen a week from today.
100%. I totally agree with you. That's going to do it for this edition of the show. Again, rate, review, follow the Niners Nation Podcast Network. Subscribe on YouTube, please. And thank you. We got a lot of good stuff coming up. We'll be live on YouTube again, 10 a.m. Pacific time tomorrow with me and Vish in our under review show. So we'll do that. Jordan, thank you very much for pinch hitting here. We really, really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It was an absolute pleasure.
Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, everybody. And as always, go Niners.